Good afternoon. It's Roy Thomas from Sutton Group Professional Realty and Halifax SeniorLiving.ca. And today we're looking at the fifth and final episode in the Aging in Place series. So far we've talked about the pros and cons in two different videos. We talked about potential renovations you may have to make to your house, and we've talked about potential costs that you may have to incur to do it. Today in the final video, we're going to do, if you will, a summary and kind of look at things you should consider if you're going to be making a decision of should you or shouldn't you age in place. Here's some of the factors that you might want to consider. If you're at that point, one thing I'd suggest, first thing to consider is what do you reasonably expect your next 5, 10, 15, 20 years to look like? Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball. No one can predict what's going to happen in the future, and unexpected things happen. But reasonably, what does your next number of years look like? How long do you reasonably think you can stay in the property? That's the first thing. How long can you reasonably expect to stay in the property? And obviously, that's going to change from one person to another. If you're recently retired in your mid to late 60s, you're in great health, you still enjoy working around the house, doing landscaping, working in your workshop, whatever the case may be, good health, you figure you probably got 10, 15 years for sure. That's one thing, that's great. If on the other hand, if you're, say, maybe in your 80s and you've had some health issues, and you know the time is coming where you're not going to be able to stay in the house, then probably it doesn't make sense to do a whole lot of aging in place features. But that's an individual situation. I know I've had some people tell me that, quote unquote, they're taking me out in a wooden box, and that's fine. And some of them, that is what ended up happening to them. But for some other people, they have an overwhelming need to stay in the house at any and all cost. And that sometimes can not end up turning out well. We've all probably heard stories of people who had a slip and fall injury in their house and ended up seriously injured or perhaps passed away. Realistically, most people at some point in time are going to have to make the decision it's time to make a move. So we should probably consider that as a factor of how long can I reasonably stay in the house. Second thing is how much renovation will the house need? Now again, nobody has a crystal ball, but you can just look at the house and start to think about it a little bit. For example, what type of house do you have? If you have a bungalow, that's different than if you have a two-story. If you have a two-story, you've got steps to deal with. You may at some point in time have to install a chair lift. You may have to bring down a bathroom and if the bathroom and bedrooms are upstairs, you may have to put a bathroom or a bedroom on the main level. Perhaps you may have to renovate a bathroom on the main level to get a walk-in tub or a sit-down shower. So look at realistically what renovations do you think you might need to do in the house. And hopefully it's just simple and nothing more than maybe a couple of grab bars. And then what potentially could those renovations cost? You want to think about what you're going to end up maybe potentially paying down the road. I mean, if you've got to widen doorways, if you've got steps outside, you may have to install ramps. On the inside, if you have steps, you may have to put a chairlift in. As I said, you may have to renovate bathrooms or enlarge them. Or you may end up having to add a main floor bathroom or bedroom. So that could potentially be very expensive. And you don't really want to be spending that money if you're only going to be buying yourself an extra 1 or 2 years. You're probably just better making a move now and going to a better laid out house, a condo or an apartment that suits your needs. I know my father, before he passed, he stayed in the house his entire life. He had a 2-story house, but thankfully he had a full bathroom and a bedroom on the main level, and only 2 steps to get in the house. And he was lucky, he had good health until he passed. So he was able to do very little renovations. A couple of grab bars was basically it. and he spent 98% of his time on the main level. So again, you want to really think about both what renovation you have to do and what the potential cost of those things could be. And the last one I think is worth considering is proximity to family, medical, shopping, and other amenities, other things that you will need. One thing to consider is that what happens if at some point in time you're no longer able to drive. I've seen that happen to clients. I recall a number of years ago, a client called me. He was no longer able to drive. His wife did not have a driver's license. They lived outside the city where there was no public transport. A taxi one way was going to be in the $40 to $50 range. And because he was no longer able to drive, he basically was made a prisoner in his house, dependent on family to drive him for everything. They decided quite quickly at that point in time they needed to make a move and moved in town and got an apartment. But you really want to look at, if you're no longer able to drive, or if you have any other mobility issues, is where you're at going to make sense? Will it work in the long run? And if it doesn't, that's something you maybe need to take into consideration. At the end of the day, there's really no right or wrong answer. It's up to you, and it's your house, and you certainly have the right to stay there as long as you want. But you might want to just take a realistic look and say, how long can I really expect to stay in this property, and what do I have to do to stay there? And decide, is it worth it? If you have any questions on this, please feel free to give me a call. You can reach me at 902-497-3031. Or you can visit me online at my website, www.halifaxseniorliving.ca. Thanks very much, and please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the notification bell so you'll be notified of all future videos. Thank you very much, and have a great day.